Before the sun rises, you are already awake. You pray in the quiet, asking for wisdom, strength, and provision. Then you move through the day with determination. You answer the messages. You pursue the work. You meet the obligations. At night, when everyone else has settled, you return to the numbers. You calculate what is due, what is missing, what might arrive, and what could go wrong. Then you lie down, but your mind refuses to lie down with you. You prayed, you worked, you planned, and still you cannot rest. This is the contradiction many sincere believers live with. You desire peace, but you have learned to treat anxiety as evidence that you care. You believe that if you stop worrying, you will become careless. If you are not mentally rehearsing every possible crisis, perhaps you are not being responsible. So worry disguises itself as diligence. Fear puts on the clothing of wisdom. Exhaustion becomes a badge proving that you are taking life seriously. But agitation is not stewardship. Sleeplessness is not strategy. Constant fear is not proof of faithfulness. The pressure may be real. The bill is not imaginary. The deadline has not disappeared. Income may be uncertain. Resources may be limited. And people may genuinely depend on you. This message does not ask you to deny facts, neglect obligations, or call hardship an illusion. There are responsibilities that must be faced, decisions that must be made, and work that must be done. Yet, pressure and the interpretation of pressure are not the same thing. A shortage can demand your attention without being granted authority over your identity. An obligation can require action without being permitted to command your inner life. The circumstance may be urgent, but fear does not therefore become qualified to govern you. That is where the deeper question begins. Perhaps you are pursuing things that are necessary while neglecting the principles meant to govern the pursuit. Perhaps the problem is not that you are working, planning, or seeking provision. Perhaps the problem is that fear has arranged the order of all three. Exhaustion is not always evidence that you are carrying more responsibility. Sometimes it reveals that responsibility has lost its governing order. Kingdom order does not remove responsibility. It removes fear from the throne of responsibility. It does not teach passive wishfulness. It does not promise effortless wealth. It does not guarantee immunity from loss, delay, or disappointment. It teaches peaceful responsibility, prayer without pretense, work without slavery, planning without panic, and stewardship without allowing uncertainty to rename you. So ask the governing question. What changes when provision is approached through kingdom order rather than fear-driven chasing? The outward actions may appear similar. You may still pray, work, calculate, and pursue opportunity. But the same busy schedule can be ruled by two entirely different orders, and the ruler changes everything. The difference begins beneath the action. Chasing and alignment may use the same calendar, make the same telephone call, complete the same application, and examine the same account. From the outside, both people appear responsible, but activity does not reveal government. You must ask what sent the person into motion. Chasing begins with fear of what may be missing. That fear is then allowed to dictate identity, capture attention, accelerate timing, and narrow decisions. It says, if I do not obtain this, I will not be safe. If I miss this opportunity, I may lose my worth. If relief does not come quickly, I must become whoever the pressure requires me to become. Fear creates pursuit. Pursuit produces temporary relief, and temporary relief soon gives way to another fear. The person stays active, but never becomes settled. Alignment begins somewhere else. It begins with identity, establishes governing priorities, and then acts responsibly from that order. It does not wait for perfect circumstances before taking action. It simply refuses to let circumstances decide what kind of person will act. Alignment says, before I pursue what may be added, I will remember what must govern me. I will tell the truth. I will honor responsibility. I will reject panic. Then I will take the next faithful step. This means applying for work can be chasing, and applying for work can be alignment. Reviewing expenses can be driven by dread or directed by honest stewardship. Asking for help can come from frantic dependence or from humble wisdom. Pursuing an opportunity can be an attempt to escape fear at any cost, or a disciplined response governed by principle. The act is not the final evidence. The governing order is. Chasing asks, what must I seize so I can become secure? Alignment asks, what is right, responsible, and faithful from where I already stand. One treats provision as the creator of identity. The other receives identity first and makes provision serve responsibility. One asks income, opportunity, and possessions to carry a weight they were never designed to carry. The other uses them without worshiping them, seeks them without surrendering to them, and manages them without expecting them to define the self. That is why provision becomes disordered when additions are asked to create the security that governing identity and priority should supply. What you acquire may change your options, but it must not become the authority that tells you who you are. Do not misunderstand alignment. It is not a spiritual technique for controlling outcomes. It does not guarantee that the application will succeed, the expense will disappear, the assistance will arrive, or the opportunity will remain. Alignment is not control over tomorrow. It is government over your conduct today. It determines how you respond when results are uncertain, delays are painful, and available choices are limited. So examine your movement. Are you acting because fear has commanded you to secure an identity, or because principle has directed you to fulfill a responsibility? Kingdom order does not make you less active. It makes your activity accountable to something higher than urgency. And once behavior is brought under government, a deeper question appears. Who are you before the needed addition arrives? Because the way you interpret a genuine shortage depends upon whether you think like a desperate outsider seeking permission to belong, or a responsible citizen acting from an identity already established. Citizenship is not a claim of entitlement. It is a position of belonging under government. A citizen does not merely receive benefits. A citizen recognizes authority, accepts responsibility, honors law, and participates in the life of the community. Citizenship says, I belong, therefore I am accountable. I am established, therefore I must act with integrity. That changes the position from which you pursue provision. The outsider mentality imagines that every need must be faced alone. It panics because it sees no order beyond the immediate threat. It isolates because it assumes no one can be trusted. It reinvents itself because pressure appears to demand a new identity for every crisis. When money becomes scarce, the outsider does not merely say, I face a shortage. The language begins to descend, I have been abandoned, I have no power, I am less than others. I must do whatever survival requires. Notice what happened. A condition became a conclusion. A fact became a verdict. Something temporary was permitted to speak as though it were eternal. But the citizen interprets pressure differently. The citizen can acknowledge need without denying belonging. The citizen can request assistance without surrendering dignity. The citizen can learn, adjust, plan, work, and participate because identity is not being invented in the middle of the emergency. It is already established under a governing order. This does not demean the person who needs help. Needing help does not make you an outsider. Refusing accountability does not make you independent. Mature citizenship knows both how to contribute and how to receive, how to carry responsibility and how to admit limitation. Belonging is not the absence of need. It is the refusal to let need erase your place, your values, or your responsibility. A bill may demand attention, but it cannot be allowed to name the person who opens it. A reduced income may require adjustment, but it cannot declare that you are powerless. A closed door may alter your options, but it does not possess the authority to reduce your worth. Circumstances describe the field in which you must act. They do not establish the identity of the one who acts. Citizenship does not cancel consequences. It does not guarantee the income you desire, exempt you from difficult choices, or release you from planning, learning, labor, correction, and wise assistance. Kingdom citizenship changes the position from which provision is pursued. It does not remove the requirement to respond responsibly to need. So when pressure attempts to rename you, answer it with disciplined language. This condition requires a response, but it does not possess the right to define my identity or govern my values. Say it until your conduct agrees with it. You are not denying the shortage. You are denying the shortage permission to become your master. You will face it soberly, seek help humbly, act honestly, and remain accountable. But established identity must become ordered action. If you belong under government, then something must govern first. When several legitimate needs compete for your attention, what does a citizen place before everything else? What comes first is not merely what you do first. Priority is not a ceremonial sequence performed at the beginning of the morning. It is governing rank. It is the authority by which every later desire, opportunity, expense, and demand is interpreted. Whatever is first does not merely receive your attention, it decides what everything else is allowed to mean. That is why secure identity must produce a visible hierarchy. Allegiance comes before acquisition. Integrity comes before advantage. Purpose comes before recognition. Responsibility comes before appetite. Care for people comes before the impulse to use them for personal gain. These are not decorative ideals for comfortable seasons. They are the governing principles that determine how provision may be pursued when pressure is severe. Income is useful. Possessions can serve legitimate needs. Opportunity can enlarge your capacity to contribute. But additions must serve governing values. They must never be promoted into governing values. Money is a powerful tool when it receives an honest assignment. It becomes a destructive master when it is permitted to interpret every choice, every relationship, and every hour. When money becomes the interpreter, the question is no longer what is right. It becomes what will pay. The question is no longer whom am I responsible to honor. It becomes who can help me advance. Rest begins to feel like guilt because every quiet hour appears unproductive. People become instruments because every relationship is measured by usefulness. Values become negotiable because compromise appears cheaper than patience. And enough keeps moving farther away because a master never announces that its appetite has finally been satisfied. This is the disorder of anxious pursuit. A legitimate addition has been promoted above the principles that were meant to govern it. So before you accept, purchase, promise, commit, or pursue, restore the proper rank. Ask, is this action lawful and honest? Does it honor the responsibilities I already carry? Is fear creating an urgency that the facts do not require? What value might I sacrifice in order to obtain the addition I desire? These questions do not remove difficult decisions. They expose the government beneath them. Ordered priority may require additional work. It may require reducing consumption, delaying a preference, declining an attractive offer, or changing a plan that no longer serves your responsibilities. It may force you to choose between two legitimate needs when both cannot be satisfied at once. Kingdom alignment does not make every choice pleasant. It keeps the unpleasant choice from becoming an unprincipled one. Place provision within your life, but do not place your life beneath provision. Let resources support responsibility. Let opportunity serve purpose. Let work express diligence. Let every addition remain accountable to allegiance, integrity, and care. But this raises an important concern. If fear no longer creates the urgency, will action become weak? If you refuse anxiety, will you delay, deny, or neglect what must be done? Can peace govern a person without making that person passive? Yes, but only when peace is understood correctly. Peace is not withdrawal from responsibility. Peace is the inner government that determines how responsibility will be carried. The first resistance to peace is often moral. If I stop worrying, will I stop caring? Will calm make me complacent, careless, or unprepared? You have trained yourself to associate agitation with vigilance. You assume the racing mind is the responsible mind, and the troubled heart is the evidence of serious commitment. But concern and anxiety are not the same. Concern identifies a responsibility and asks what response is required. Anxiety identifies a danger and rehearses it repeatedly, even when the rehearsal produces no wiser action. Concern can lead to a decision. Anxiety often leads back to itself. One clarifies duty, the other multiplies dread. Peace does not erase concern. It disciplines concern so that responsibility can be seen clearly. Panic compresses your vision. It makes the nearest threat appear to be the only fact, the fastest response appear to be the best response, and immediate relief appear to be the highest good. Under panic, you overlook information, misread motives, exaggerate consequences, and accept choices you would reject in a governed state. Peace widens your capacity. It gives you room to examine the facts without decorating them with terror. It permits you to seek counsel without shame, compare options without haste, and choose deliberately without pretending the choice is easy. Peace does not slow responsible action. It removes the confusion that makes activity expensive, impulsive, and misdirected. Suppose an urgent bill arrives and the available money is insufficient. Chasing reacts first to the fear. It assumes the worst, hides from communication, reaches for instant relief, or accepts a dishonest shortcut because any escape feels justified. Alignment responds differently. It verifies what is actually owed. It communicates early instead of disappearing. It reviews the available options, adjusts what can be adjusted, reduces what can be reduced, and asks what responsible help may be available. Then it chooses the next honest action. The obligation remains urgent, but urgency is no longer permitted to abolish judgment. This is calm responsibility. It is not indifference. It is disciplined readiness. Do not confuse peace with emotional numbness. You may have peace and still feel grief. You may have peace while the outcome remains uncertain, while an obligation is overdue, or while the answer you receive is not the answer you wanted. Peace does not require you to call pain pleasant or loss harmless. It means pain is felt without being crowned, and uncertainty is faced without being obeyed. Nor does peace guarantee that every careful response will produce immediate relief. Communication may not change the deadline. Counsel may reveal only difficult options. Honest action may still carry an unwanted consequence. Kingdom peace governs the quality of your response. It does not promise control over every result. So release the false belief that fear must perform the role of wisdom. You can care deeply without panicking. You can prepare thoroughly without predicting disaster. You can move quickly without being driven blindly. Peace does not mean there is nothing to do. It means fear is no longer deciding how you will do it. And when fear no longer controls the action, work can return to its proper place, not as the savior of your identity, but as the diligent expression of your responsibility. Alignment does not diminish labor. It gives labor a purpose and a boundary. When peace governs you, you do not withdraw from effort. You bring your effort under order. Work, prepare, develop your skill. Arrive when you said you would arrive. Serve with excellence. Learn what you do not know. Persevere when progress is slow. These are not signs that you lack faith. They are forms of responsible participation. Prayer does not replace preparation, and trust does not excuse neglect. What you place in God's hands should still be carried faithfully in yours. But you must understand why you work. Working from purpose is not the same as working for identity. When you work from purpose, you offer value, solve problems, strengthen capacity, and fulfill responsibility. When you work for identity, every achievement must prove that you matter, every promotion must quiet insecurity, and every payment must purchase a sense of safety. Yet achievement cannot complete that assignment. The more identity demands from productivity, the less any accomplishment feels sufficient. You should work with all your strength, but you should never ask your work to become the source of your worth. Your employment is connected to provision, but employment, vocation, and provision are not identical. A job is one present arrangement through which you may contribute and receive income. It may begin, change, contract, or end. But a change in employment does not erase your responsibility, cancel your capacity, or destroy your purpose. You remain able to learn, serve, create, seek, adjust, and contribute even while the next arrangement is uncertain. This is why Kingdom Order rejects two distortions. The first is passive waiting, refusing preparation, overlooking opportunity, and calling in action trust. The second is compulsive striving, working without healthy limits because you imagine enough effort can control every result. One abandons responsibility. The other claims an authority that effort does not possess. Work belongs in your hand as a tool. It does not belong above you as a ruler. A tool can build, repair, cultivate, and provide when directed by principle. But when work is exalted, it begins to consume the person it was meant to serve. Rest becomes shame. Relationships become interruptions. Health becomes expendable. Every delay becomes a personal verdict. Bring labor back under government. Assess your present capacity honestly. Identify the training you need. Examine the opportunities actually available. Decide what level of effort can be sustained without neglecting essential responsibilities. Ask for instruction, partnership, or assistance when your limitations require it. Then act consistently, humbly, and courageously. This may improve your conditions, but it does not guarantee a particular income, position, or timetable. Skill may increase opportunity without eliminating rejection. Perseverance may produce progress without preventing loss. Responsible labor influences outcomes. It does not command them. So labor with dignity, not desperation. Offer your strength without surrendering your identity. Let work expand your capacity, not determine your value. And once you have produced, earned, received, or borrowed, another responsibility begins. Whatever is now in your hand must be governed through stewardship. Stewardship begins where expectation ends and reality is faced. It does not manage the income you hope will arrive, the opportunity you imagine may open, or the relief you wish someone would provide. It governs what is present now. Trust becomes visible when it tells the truth, accepts limits, and gives present resources an honest assignment. This includes more than money. Your time must be governed. Your abilities must be developed. Your possessions must be maintained. Your commitments must be measured. Your relationships must be honored. Whatever has entered your care carries a responsibility, whether it was produced, earned, received, or borrowed. Vague confidence is not a plan. Know what comes in, know what goes out. Identify what is owed, when it is due, and what consequence follows delay. Separate a genuine need from a strong desire. Record the commitments already made before making another. Review these decisions regularly, because yesterday's arrangement may not fit today's conditions. Stewardship gives trust a schedule. It turns intention into inspection, values into limits, and responsibility into repeated action. This discipline is not reserved for abundance. Scarcity does not make stewardship unnecessary. It makes clarity more important. When resources are limited, every assignment carries greater weight. That is not humiliation. It is mature government. You do not need a large amount before you can become honest about a small one. You do not need perfect conditions before you can practice order within difficult conditions. Shame will tell you not to look. It will leave notices unopened, balances unknown, obligations unlisted, and conversations delayed. Avoidance appears to protect you from pain, but it permits fear to expand inside uncertainty. What remains unseen cannot be governed accurately. Honest visibility may be uncomfortable, but discomfort with facts is more useful than comfort built on concealment. Accurate information gives you a place to stand. Once you know what is present, you can reduce spending, revise timing, communicate with those affected, request different terms, or reconsider a commitment. If your present capacity is insufficient, seek counsel. Receive appropriate community support. Consult qualified professional guidance when the situation requires knowledge you do not possess. Asking for help can be an act of stewardship when it is joined to truth, accountability, and responsible follow-through. You may also need to build capacity through learning, added service, different work, or a revised plan. But do not assign tomorrow's possible increase to today's certain obligation. Hope should inspire preparation. It should not falsify the numbers. Good stewardship does not guarantee wealth. Careful records cannot prevent every loss. Wise limits cannot control every emergency. Honest planning cannot force an opportunity to remain. The promise of stewardship is not effortless prosperity. Its fruit is integrity, clarity, preparedness, and decisions that remain governed when conditions change. So establish this language within yourself. I will not pretend, panic, or postpone. I will tell the truth about what is in my hand and govern it faithfully. Then review, assign, adjust, communicate, act. And when pressure suddenly demands an answer, you will need more than a standing system. You will need a disciplined pause that keeps fear from choosing before principle can speak. A system proves its value when pressure tests it. Threatening news arrives, and the mind immediately interprets it. This will ruin everything. Relief must come now. I cannot afford to wait. That interpretation creates false urgency. False urgency demands instant movement, and movement without government becomes reaction. The chase does not begin with the decision. It begins when fear is allowed to explain the news. So interrupt the sequence. First, pause. A pause is not refusal to act, and it is not permission to ignore a real deadline. It is the deliberate space in which you prevent emotion from becoming authority. Some matters require speed, but none require panic. Even a brief pause can separate responsible urgency from fearful acceleration. Second, name the fear. Do not merely say, "I feel pressure." Ask what the pressure is predicting. Are you afraid of losing income, disappointing someone, appearing unsuccessful, or facing a consequence you cannot control? Fear becomes more persuasive when it remains unnamed. Once named, it can be examined instead of obeyed. Third, remember your identity. You are not an abandoned outsider who must become dishonest to survive. You are a responsible citizen under governing principles. The shortage may limit your options, but it does not suspend your values. The deadline may demand a response, but it does not possess the authority to rewrite who you are. Fourth, examine facts and priorities. Ask what is actually true. What am I predicting? Which value is fear asking me to violate? What responsibility belongs to today? Who should be consulted? Separate the confirmed fact from the feared conclusion. Remember what comes first. Integrity does not become optional because relief is available. Existing responsibilities do not disappear because a new possibility is attractive. Suppose an opportunity appears to promise quick relief, but accepting it would require you to hide important information, assume a risk you cannot sustain, or neglect a responsibility already entrusted to you. Fear will call compromise practical. It will say the pressure leaves no choice. But urgency cannot overrule integrity. A temporary need does not authorize a permanent surrender of character. Fifth, choose the next responsible action. Not every action. The next one. Make the call, revise the budget, complete the application, negotiate honestly. Rest before exhaustion corrupts judgment. Seek timely help from someone able to offer wisdom, accountability, or qualified guidance. Peaceful responsibility is not motionlessness. It is ordered movement. Establish replacement language before the next anxious moment arrives. I will not make a permanent surrender to answer a temporary pressure. I will act, but I will act in order. Practice this when the pressure is ordinary, not only when the crisis is severe. Use it in small purchases, difficult conversations, work decisions, delayed answers, and uncertain plans. Maturity is not revealed by admiring a principle. It is revealed by repeating it until it governs conduct. Pause. Name the fear. Remember who you are. Face the facts. Restore priority. Choose the next responsible action. The chase loses power each time fear is interrupted and responsibility resumes under principle. And through that repetition, you are not merely making better decisions, you are becoming a different kind of person. Now return to the believer who began this journey exhausted. The morning may still begin with prayer. The day may still require sustained work. The evening may still bring numbers that do not yet resolve neatly. The bills may remain, the income may remain uncertain, and the future may refuse to explain itself. But something decisive has changed. Fear no longer governs the whole person. Prayer is no longer used to escape responsibility. It restores allegiance. Work is no longer commanded to guarantee identity. It fulfills an assignment. Planning is no longer an attempt to control tomorrow. It prepares an honest response to today. Stewardship is no longer postponed until abundance arrives. It governs what is already present. And peace is not waiting at the end of perfect circumstances. Peace is governing the person within unfinished circumstances. This is the transformation. Outsider panic becomes citizen responsibility. Additions lose first place, and principles recover their rank. Anxious activity becomes deliberate action. Work descends from savior to servant. Avoidance gives way to honest stewardship. Prayer, labor, planning, and careful management no longer compete with trust. Under kingdom order, they become one pattern of peaceful responsibility. Do not misunderstand the promise. Alignment does not guarantee effortless wealth. It does not prevent loss, cancel hardship, secure every opportunity, or make every consequence disappear. You may act wisely and still receive an unwelcome answer. You may work faithfully and still face delay. You may plan carefully and still encounter conditions you could not predict. Kingdom order does not give you mastery over every outcome. It gives principal mastery over your response. That is provision understood rightly. Not merely possessing more, but becoming trustworthy with what passes through your hands. Not merely escaping shortage, but refusing to let shortage corrupt your identity, priorities, or conduct. You do not overcome the chase by possessing everything. You overcome it when what is missing can no longer govern who you are or dictate how you act. So identify one area where chasing has displaced alignment. Name it honestly. Then identify one responsibility that belongs to you now, not the entire future, not every possible consequence. One present responsibility. At the next pressure decision, make this commitment. I will pause before fear interprets the moment. I will tell the truth about the facts. I will guard my integrity. I will seek wise help when it is needed. I will take the next responsible step, and I will leave the outcome outside the throne of my identity. Repeat that order until it becomes character. The mature person is not the person who controls every result. The mature person remains governed when results are uncertain, prayerful without passivity, diligent without desperation, careful without anxiety, and peaceful without neglect. That is no longer an exhausted chaser. That is a responsible citizen, a faithful worker, and a peaceful steward.